The morning the bells were supposed to ring for fear, Hob the Cooper woke before the sky took a color and laid a palm on the oak staves he'd bound the night before. The hoops were cold enough to bite. He held still, listening. In the quiet the city had when the night watch gave way, he could hear the faintest hush from the casks of the Alchemist's Guild, like a cat breathing in a dark room. Green dreams, the apprentices called it, with the grin of boys boasting. Hob did not grin. He had a wife with bad ankles and a daughter who braided other girls' hair on the street of silk for coppers. And he knew that any craft that hissed when you went near was not to be grinned at. He lifted his tools one by one from the pegged board, the crooked drawknife, the mallet black with pitch, the wedge he'd had since he was first taken on by the old master at the hook. The guild cellars were deeper than any rightly should be. They carried their own weather into them, something wet and old that clung like cold hands. When he pushed the door open, the torches guttered backward. The green jars squatted in their wicker cradles in a dim that seemed to thicken around them, each sealed mouth glinting faintly, each carrying a sigil he did not try to puzzle out. Letters for men whose fingernails were clean. He set himself to the staves with a measured patience, tapping, listening for the hollow note that meant a split. Above him, the city shifted on its bed. The soft thunder of carts rolling toward the fish market, shutters thrown up, a call for fresh bread. In the distance, a bell rang once and stopped, as if it had thought better of it. Hob kept working until he made himself stop and lift his head. There, that breath again, a faint whisper from the far arch, beyond the line where even the torchlight didn't reach. He'd been hearing it for days and telling himself it was wind finding old cracks, or the twitch of rope. It was different this morning. Rapid, halting, new wet, something being taught to breathe. Don't go, he told himself, and went. The farther arch opened on a chamber Hob had never been paid to see. There was heat here that the torches did not cause, an embered weight in the air that made each breath taste of copper pennies. He smelled struck flint. There were shapes on low iron stands, 3 once, or 4, Hob thought, though he would have sworn the numbers changed as he stared. Eggs was the word the old stories used, fat as a man's chest, stony with scales of dull color. But stones did not sweat. The nearest one beaded condensation that steamed as it ran, and as Hob watched, something within it shifted against its shell. He put a hand out without meaning to. Heat licked his palm. The thing inside clawed, and very faintly he heard what might have been a sound of irritation or longing. A hand touched the hinge of his jaw, light but precise. "Mind your hand," said a voice, warm as the room. "It is not a stove you tend, Cooper. It is a fire that remembers." Hob jerked back. The man beside him wore a robe with sleeves that fell away like drapes in a rich house. His hair was thin and his eyes were the odd brown that looks black by candlelight. Hob had spoken to him twice before, under the Guildhall's public lamps, when the sums were reckoned, so he knew him. Haleen of the Alchemists, master of powders and jars and patience. The robe smelled faintly of almonds and vinegar. "I only," Hob said, and forgot what comes after only. A second shape moved in the darkness. Smaller, in plain wool with a singed edge, eyes gray as river water and lined, though the face was not yet old. Marin, Haleen's newest apprentice. Hob knew his face from the way boys know one another across trades, nodding when their paths crossed, each thinking the other's work stranger. "The dwarf's chain is raised?" Haleen asked Marin, not taking his eyes from the eggs. "Sir Bron's men are cranking now," the boy said. "The river's low with the wind. They say it will be ready before the Black Betha shows her flag in the channel." "They say," Haleen said, with a private smile. He bent his head to the nearest egg as a man might incline to a queen and whispered to it. The language was wrong in Hob's ear. It moved like river light, not like words. The room answered with the softest crack, like ice accepting a weight. Hob put the heel of his hand against his mouth to keep from speaking. He thought of his daughter Sella's small head under his palm when she was a baby, the new warmth of it, the unsteady rhythm of her sleep. He thought of the jars out in their cradles, patient, waiting for someone to be careless. The master raised his head and looked at him as if he knew each thought in turn. "You kept your hoops true," Haleen said. "You will keep your tongue as true. We are out of time for slow work. Fetch your men." The carts must roll by sunrise if the king is to have his fireworks. The hand, Meryn said, reflexive. The king? Helene repeated, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The hand is a hinge. The door is larger. Hob rubbed his palm on his sleeve and was surprised to find sweat there. He nodded and turned back toward the casks, toward the work that was his and understandable. As he went, he looked once over his shoulder. For an instant he thought he saw the shape under the shell press, its silhouette against the thin stone. Something that was not a lizard. It had too much intent for that, and the wrong proportion of chest to throat to head. It pressed again. The sound it made was the sound of the first candle lit in a dark house. By the time Hob set his shoulder to the cart at the Guildhall's loading arch, the city had found its noise. Goldcloaks shouted at the mudgate where fishermen threaded their skiffs between the hulks of royal galleys. A man had a sack of garlic split, and the stink made a woman curse him in a voice that broke. The sky was the color of pewter that has seen many hands. Hob. B put his weight into the wheel and felt the old groove in the flagstone catch and give. From the far arch, Helene's voice came once, a phrase that sounded like the scrape of a flint stricken, and then the shift of something greater than words, like a breath taken that had been forgotten for a long time. On the walls above the river, Tyrion Lannister held his goblet under his nose and wished it were less honest. The wine smelled of cinnamon and the innards of a raisin barrel and something sharp that reminded him of his father's temper. He sipped anyway. It steadied the tremor in his left hand that he preferred not to acknowledge. The wind off the Blackwater had a tang of weed and mud and distant marsh fire. It brought the city with it. Wet wool, smoke from cottages that had no leave to burn anything but reeds. Rich kitchens turning out sugar buns that morning for lords who would not eat much. The underlying sour of too many bodies in too little space. And underneath that, some other scent, faint as a memory, that he could not place, like stones warmed behind a fire. Varys appeared as he always did, without sound and with the air of a man who had always been present and only now made the kindness of acknowledging it. His robes had a sheen like the inside of a shell. His expression was mild. That never kept Tyrion from imagining the thoughts behind it had knives attached. "You smell it too," Varys said, as if they had been speaking. "It is a clever perfume for a day like this." "What is?" "The city," Varys said. "Fear has a scent. Ambition has another. Love has a third, quite different, though they say it often strays into the first two." Tyrion watched the river. Beyond the boom chain, the water was blank and dark and unbroken as the lid of a barrel. He had stood on that same parapet to watch cranes swing bridgestones when he was a boy, proud of the knowledge that the stones were heavier than any man. He remembered the feel of Lord Tywin's hand heavy and final on his shoulder, pushing him just enough. He remembered being small. There are some memories one carries like a second head, he thought. If you turn the right way, it bumps into things. "Do you think they will come in on the morning tide?" Tyrion asked. "Or wait for King's Landing to finish its breakfast?" "Stannis Baratheon is a man who chews each bite until his jaw aches," Varys said. "He will not rush unless the taste of the city is in his mouth already. But his captains know the water better than he does, and the water has opinions." Bronn walked along the wall with his accustomed slouch, his boot heels tapping a steady, insolent rhythm. He tipped a deferent 2 fingers to Tyrion without slowing. "My lots say the chain's ready for the river's neck," he said. "Your pet firemakers have sent their toys to be played with. There's a ship down there loaded to the eyes with jars and wrapped in kindling like a whore on a cold night. Clever, that. Put something beautiful in the river and watch the fools row toward it." "You have the soul of a poet," Tyrion said. "No," Bronn said. "I have the soul of a man who likes to be paid to see tomorrow. I hear the dog's gone soft. That help us or hurt us? Ser Sandor does not do well with fire," Tyrion said, and tasted pity in his mouth for no good reason. "There will be fire. If you're right, there will be too much of it," Bronn said, and went on along the wall, calling to his men. From the wharf side, the clatter of winches shook the air as the last crank-turners took up the slack in the chain. Tyrion watched the great links creep upward, wet and dark and slick as eel flesh. The black iron was old, hammered for another purpose, repurposed twice since. Every link a story of a man's back stretched and his fingers blistered. He liked it. He liked work that could be seen and touched. He had never much cared for the other kind, the work of whispers and otter fires. He glanced toward the guild hall. Smoke rose from its near chimneys, white as sheep's breath. He thought of Helene's pale, avid eyes. "It is more stable than it has been in years," the master had told him, in the careful tones of a man offering a knife and asking you to admire its balance. "The jars no longer weep, my lord. The substance itself has taken on a livelier green. We cannot say why." "Do not say why," Tyrion had said, dry. "Say how much." "Enough if we are clever," Helene had said. He did not say, "if we are lucky." Tyrion preferred men who confessed to luck. It seemed the only god that answered. On the deck of the Black Betha, Davos Seaworth cupped his fingers around the rim of his mug to warm them. The mug held small beer, the kind you give to children and men expected to work, but even so it had a comfort his bones recognized. The river air crept down his sleeves like a thief. He had not slept long enough to dream. His son Mathos stood at the waist, tightening the strap of his breastplate with a deliberation that made Davos ache. "Good leather," Davos said. "From Storm's End," Mathos said. "Lord Stannis sees to his men." "Lord Stannis sees to what is his," Davos said, and the words came with the reflexive loyalty of a promise he had made a long time ago. The river opened ahead, widening like a mouth. Across it, King's Landing huddled under its walls and 7 hills, its red keep pricking the sky like an accusation. Mathos turned his head. "You doubt." "I do not doubt Stannis," Davos said. "I doubt men who do not know they can drown. I doubt the wind when it changes. I doubt the river when it drops, so you can walk a mile out and think you are safe." He remembered the first time he had come up the Blackwater with a belly full of onions and a ship full of fear. The city of Story and Marwyn's Rock a Rumor. This time the fear wore armor. How many ships did Salador bring when he brought his excuses? "Enough," Mathos said, stiffening on the word. "Lord Stannis trusts him as far as he must. And no fart." "Her," Davos said, which was wisdom as far as it went. The Black Betha's drummer lifted his sticks and brought them down in a beat that carried across the pressed water. Oars rose and fell. The fleet drew itself into a column like a snake, forgetting it was many pieces. Salador San's gilded galleys gleamed even under a sullen sky. He had a talent for gilding that paid better than piety. A shout went down the line. The men drawing breath to shout it again hesitated on the second syllable. Davos stepped up onto the rail and narrowed his eyes toward the city's mouth. Against the shadow of the boom towers, a low mast shifted on the river, the kind of shift that comes when something is present you know ought not be. A single slow ship angled on the current as if feigning clumsiness. It was laced with bundled brush and torn sailcloth hung to dry. There was a sweetish tang in the wind that made Davos' tongue tell him it had tasted almonds. "Fire ship," Mathos said, with young contempt. "Clumsy trick." "It's clumsy until you're close," Davos said. "And then it's clever." He had seen enough trapdoors to respect the unlovely carpenter's hand behind the trap. He wanted the men to pull their starboard oars now, swing wide, but he knew better than to shout through another man's trumpet. At the prow, the Betha's figurehead, a black woman with a knife in her hair, looked toward King's Landing with a narrowed gaze as if she doubted their welcome. "Keep your hands," Davos said to the oarsmen, though they did not need telling, and the Betha kept her patient rhythm. The drums of other ships spoke to one another over water that had no answers to give. In the September of Baelor, between the pillars that went up like a forest petrified, Sansa Stark knelt with her hands folded until the knuckles pressed into one another. She had knelt until her knees stopped speaking. The September was full of women's voices and the particular breath that ordinary fear has when it turns into prayer. The small sobs pulled through the nose to keep them private, the whispers that turn words into a smooth, uncut line. The mother's face on her marble plinth found Sansa's gaze whenever she lifted it, and there were days when the mother's expression comforted her and days when she thought the mother looked as if she had just realized something. Today the mother looked as if her mouth might open and say a thing the room would not like. "Your Grace." Maester Pycelle's whisper oiled itself along the floor like a spill. The queen sat in a chair low enough to look like humility if you squinted. The chair was on a little dais. Cersei Lannister wore a gown the color of wine you are not allowed to drink. She wore a face that knew you would try to drink it anyway, and she would give you the cup if you were interesting enough when you asked. "You are devout this morning," Cersei said to Sansa, as if remarking on the weather. "I am afraid," Sansa said. She did not bother to be clever. Cleverness was a ladder missing steps when the queen put a foot on it. "You will have company," Cersei said. "Fear breeds like rabbits. When they come to the city, they will find it overrun." "Are we?" Sansa began, and stopped herself from finishing a question that had no safe answers. "Saved," Cersei said. "Do not ask me for prophecies. I leave that to girls who sleep with shadows. We have Wildfire. We have a chain, my brother, made out of thin air and a temper that may do more. We have men who will watch the walls and not run until their feet are too hot to stand on. And we have wine. You will take some." Sansa accepted a cup from a serving girl whose hand shook. The wine warmed her tongue and did nothing else. The queen's own cup was larger than was strictly seemly. There was a knight with no hair standing by her shoulder, his sword unbelted. His expression the expression of iron that has been made into a blade and has not minded the change. "Island Pain." Sansa looked away. "Do you smell it?" Cersei asked. She did not mean incense. Sansa did smell something under the incense, under the candle wax and lilies, thin as a thread. She searched for a word for it and failed. "Stone after rain," she said finally. "It would do." The queen's mouth tilted at a corner. "What a North answer," she said. "If we live the day, I will have it bottled and wear it. Perfume of victory, or of whatever this is. Do you know some women are telling one another that dragons are coming? The city makes stories the way dogs scratch fleas, endlessly and with satisfaction. Dragons, Lady Sansa. Would you be afraid of them?" "Yes," Sansa said, because that was also a safe answer. Somewhere behind her, a woman began to sing. The song was one Sansa had heard since childhood, of the maiden and the stranger and the river that did not ask questions. The first verse had always sounded to her like a cloak being shaken out. Now it sounded like something being let go of because the hands were tired. In the Guildhall, Meryn ran. He ran the particular run of an apprentice sent and sent again, the run that has 3 speeds and all of them are a full effort. He had an armful of leather gloves that had been soaked in vinegar and dried precisely twice, and he had never imagined the weight in a bundle of gloves could tire a man. When he reached the lower arch and slipped through the turn, he stopped without meaning to. The shape on the iron frame in the closest cradle was not a stone this time, and not a shape pretending. It had broken itself open along its seams in a peel that had left the rims of shell black with heat. What lay inside was small and furious and wet, each breath shuddering the ribcage with held sound. Its hide was the dull color of coin rubbed thin with fingers at first. Then, as it breathed, a sheen rose on it, fine as the sheen on oil. It shook its head and skittered forward on 2 large claws. The membranes of its wings stuck to themselves like leaves that had frozen together and thawed. Aaron had seen lizards. He had cooked them on little spits with the spice a summer islander had once sold him. He had seen bats come out of broken roofs at dusk. The thing in the cradle was neither, and the insistence of its difference made Meryn's skin feel too tight. It made a sound, and the air around it seemed to take that sound and be improved by it, made thinner and more ready. Haleen did not kneel. He put a hand out and held it steady, and the creature's head lifted. Its nostrils flared, taking in all the scents the world had not had time to present. It hissed. It took a breath and let it go, and the breath was not flame. It was the absence of restraint, and it came back to the creature smelling of pitch and vinegar and ancient ash. "There," Haleen said, very softly. Meryn thought he had never heard the master say anything that was not intended for an audience. "There you are. I wondered if you would be so rude as to wait for the city to be ash. Thank you for your impatience." Another egg cracked. The room was a chorus of new breath and old heat. Haleen's face, turned to the second cradle, was naked for an instant with something so raw Meryn had to look away. "Remember," the master said to Meryn without looking at him, "they know heat the way you know bread. Do not offer them anything you are not willing to see on fire." On the river, the trap was sprung as neatly as a hand closing. The single slow ship drifted in, runtish and sweet as a gift no one quite believed in. It kissed the bow of a Stormlander galley and hooked there. And in that small contact, something like a sigh was released. Davos saw the heat leap along a line no eyes could see. Saw men in oiled leather leaning too close suddenly flap at their sleeves. And then the river stood up. The green fire was an argument made to water and settled. It thrust its blade into the air, livid and loud, and the sound it made ran along Davos' skin like ants. The men nearest it didn't have time to scream. Men farther away did. Sails that had been turned and dampened caught like dry crowns. The river caught too. The surface flowed and then seized in a skin of flame. The world smelled like almonds and rot. Ropes burned if you looked at them. Davos bellowed for the Betha's oars, and the men put their backs into saving their ship with that particular calm men find when the world becomes simple. Do this or drown. Father, Mathos said, but the word was not a call for help. It was a prayer, or a protest, or a surprise. He was looking up. Davos followed his gaze because he had no wisdom left to guess with. Something passed over the white smoke that was not cloud or soot. Its shadow had a shape to it the eye wanted to call bird and could not. It turned, and for a breath its underside was visible. Pale as unbleached flax along the belly, darker on the flanks. The membraned wings veined as delicately as a woman's wrist. It moved wrong for a bird. It moved the way a flame moves when you draw a breath too close to it. Then it opened its mouth, and the sound it made stripped the voice from the men on the decks of 3 ships at once. Davos' mouth said, without consulting him, by all the gods. The thing banked, and the wind off its wing put the green fire into a briefly different shape, a curl like a thing amused. It drew a breath, the long in-breath of anything that has learned that its breath will change the room, and let it out. This time flame came, not the damp green of the alchemist's fires, but a thin, intensely bright jet like molten glass being pulled. Where it touched the water, the wildfire leapt as if called by a friend's name. The men on the prow of the ship nearest raised their shields with a ridiculous reflex, as if the thing could be persuaded not to be what it was by the presence of pine. It came on. A second shape tumbled after the first, smaller and darker. Its shoulders ridged, its head spiked like the bones of a thorn bush. It caught a banner in its talons and shook it as a terrier does a rat. The banner caught. The men holding it let go. It did not help. The banner was on fire in the air alone. On the wall, bronze spat. Well then, he said, as if he'd been expecting it and merely found it took a different form than he had typed up in his mind. Tyrion had a hand on the Merlin and did not realize he had put it there until he felt the chisel scars in the stone under his palm. A memory came at him wrapped in old silk. A book from the Rock's library with a woodcut of 3 shapes above the field of fire, tiny with distance and printed with the wrong number of claws. He had been 9, and his father had told him that reading about dragons did not make a man larger. He had made a joke. It had been the wrong one. He had decided then that if he ever saw a dragon he would greet it as an old librarian. He did not greet. He held his breath in his chest where fear kept it like a fist. He looked at Varys and saw, to his annoyance and his respect, that the spymaster's expression had changed. A small thing had been placed out of order in his face. Something like hunger showed through. "What have you done?" Tyrion said, and meant it as a joke and not a joke both. "I," Varys said lightly, and the lightness rang like a silver coin struck against stone. "My lord, I do not even know how to fly a kite." Below, the chain lifted its head from the water, dark and blunted and heavy. The wildfire had made a wall of heat that ships that had not yet burned were rowing into, blind with smoke. And above that wall, the 2 shapes wrote their hot signatures across the air, looping back on their own breath as if delighted by it. The hound stood in the shadow of the mud gate with his helm off and his hair damp at the temple. He knew the river in all the ways a man who has had his face rewritten by fire knows anything that burns. This fire was wrong. It went where it chose. You could dunk a hand into a bucket and pull it out still burning with the green O. F it. He had told the dwarf that if the little lord wanted his pretty trick played on men who had not figured out how to be afraid of fire, he should play it himself. The dwarf had smiled that tired, brave, furious smile that made the hound want to put a fist in it and protect it both. "Sire," a gold cloak said behind him. "Orders from the hand." The men are to hold. Bulls are to grow feathers, Sandor said, and squinted along the quay. The heat dried his mouth even in the river wind. When he was a boy, he had thought of fire as a single thing, like a beast that could be put back in its pen if you used the right stick. That had been before his brother had held his face to the brazier. He could feel the scar under his helmless cheek pull tight when he thought of it even now. He looked up because men around him were looking up, because something in their looking made him do it even though he wanted to keep his eyes on the practical, on the gates and the men and the stone. A shape passed overhead with a hiss like a poker's iron in snow. When it turned, the light took it and showed its underparts pale as bone. It might have been beautiful if not for the part of Sandor that remembered the smell of his own flesh cooking with a clarity that made most other smells something like lies. Men cried out. Some knelt because even when you do not believe in anything you can kneel from habit. Sandor did not kneel. He had to fight 3 different parts of himself to keep from running for the dark. The beast stooped and cut its breath across a stretch of river that had been clear water. It burned. Sandor closed his eyes against a memory he did not want. When he opened them, the creature was beating its wings hard enough that the air jumped around its edges. It was small, he realized. Smaller than the stories would have had. If you put it on its side, it would fit in the great hearth of a hall. It did not matter. The fire in its throat was the right kind. Hold, Sandor said thickly, to men who had started to take steps backward as if baptizing themselves in retreat. Hold, curse you. They held. He thought of the hand, and for a moment his mouth twisted in something like a grin. If the dwarf had conjured this, Sandor meant to buy him a drink that would burn the whole way down and laugh until it hurt. In the guild hall, Haleen laughed once, silently. Meryn heard it with the back of his ears. The 2 little monsters. No, that was wrong even as he thought it. They were not little, not monsters. Shook themselves until the last membrane peeled off and dropped to the floor with a wet slap. The smell of them made Meryn's mouth flood with water and then dry out, as if one sense could not decide what to be. Haleen put a hand flat under the pale one's jaw and lifted it, gently, as if testing the weight. The creature opened its mouth and Meryn saw the pale flame at the hinge of its throat, the place where fire waited to be called. It looked like a promise or a threat, which were not always different. They will not be ridden today, Haleen said, as calmly as if making a note about a ledger. They are too new. They are what they are. It is enough. Open the doors. The apprentices heaved at wheel and bar and the big doors at the archground grudgingly inward. The light that came in turned the green in the jars to a color Meryn's eyes did not know how to look at in a place that was not the inside of his head. The dark-backed creature, broader, its scales a ragged dark brown that might one day deepen to something worthy of a lord's cloak, stepped forward. It put a foot down on the stone as if it had always known what stone was. It tasted the air. For an instant, its eyes caught Meryn's. There were colors in the dark like polished jet that he could not resolve. It looked at him and he had the unhelpful, immediate notion of being chosen for something he would not be offered the opportunity to decline. Go on, little queen, Haleen said, to the pale one. The creature hissed and flared its modest wings, and in their small span the air tilted. Meryn felt pressure in his ears as if he were diving. It gathered itself and sprang, and the sound it made reminded him of drawn silk. The darker one followed, less graceful, more immediate. They cleared the lintel without difficulty and were sky. For a long breath none of the men in the chamber spoke. Then the torches seemed brighter, as if shamed. You called it queen, Meryn said, his voice very carefully normal. Is it a queen? It is what it will be, Haleen said. A man who has read will tell you that dragons are a language before they are a fact. Queen is a word that might persuade, or it might convince us of something that is not true. It does no harm to pretend we can flatter fire. Who will command them? Meryn asked, shocking himself, as if the question were a hand he had thrust into a cage. Haleen did not strike him for it. No one, Haleen said. Everyone. The city. The hunger in them that pushes against the hunger in this place. There is a grammar between a beast and where it lives. For now, we will ask. Go find the hand and tell him we have paid part of a debt we did not know we owed. He will want to count the coins before they cool. Tyrion stood with the wind buzzing in his teeth and watched as the river turned into a map of mistakes. Stannis' ships had been well-ordered coming in, a column with sense and discipline and number. The chain rising crossed that column with a blunt line like a boy's chalk mark. When the fire came up, order and number mattered less than whether men could keep hold of their oars. But even in the wrong fire, you can see the right sea captain, and there were men in the Stormlander ships who knew how to move with wind and flame. Galley after galley swung wide when the green blaze leapt, taking a breath away from the initial inferno. Those farther in were not so lucky. A Myrish galley with white sails folded like a bird a broken neck and vanished. Somewhere a drum kept beating without a drummer to beat it, lull, and it took Tyrion a foolish moment to realize the drum was the sound of the chain grinding in its housing. "Raise it," he shouted, pointless, delighted to be shouting something honest. "Higher." A gull dropped out of the murk and hung for a breath in the air as if astonished by the change in its world. One of the shapes looped around it idly and it fled as if it had been insulted. Bronn said a word no woman would be publicly attached to and fitted an arrow to his short bow with casual, professional hands. "Don't waste shafts," Tyrion said. "I'm not wasting them," Bronn said. "I'm practicing," and loosed. The arrow went wide without shame. Bronn did not look displeased. "The king would like his own look," a courtier said behind them, bright as a fluting note. Tyrion did not turn. The king could have as many looks as he liked so long as he kept them safely behind stone. Joffrey's shrillness carried even when his words were not in earshot. Tyrion had the uncharitable certainty that if he looked now, he would see the boy's mouth a thin, angry line like a cut. "You may tell his grace," Tyrion said, "that the city is not yet burnt, and that he may congratulate himself on being alive even without taking the air. If he has commentary, he may send it to me with a ribbon tied around it." The courtier swallowed a smile because men sometimes lived longer that way and withdrew. Varys watched him go with that kind of attention he gave to small motions. "You will be stabbed," he said in a voice like a man remarking on weather. "If not for this, then for something adjacent. I was counting on your not allowing the number of knives in the room to increase without notice," Tyrion said. He did not take his eyes from the sky. The pale beast had the cleaner line. Its fire ran forth in a pure stream like a glassblower drawing a rod to thinness. The darker one's flame burned at the edges, sodden, but it made the wildfire answer with a greedy leap. They worked the river the way boys might work a crowded street, with instinct and delight, burning pockets into the tangle and then circling back to watch. "I am a humble servant," Varys said. "No," Tyrion said. "You are an expensive one?" And he thought of Helene's earlier smile and felt the first lurch of a suspicion he did not yet trust enough to taste. He had told the alchemists to make him Wildfire, and perhaps they had made him this instead. There is always a thing inside the thing you ask for, he thought, and sometimes it is the only part that matters. On the Betha, Davos moved through men whose eyes were showing a lot of white. The ship had come through the first green wall clean, by luck and craft, and now found itself in a pocket where clear water lapped like breath between the tongues of flame. The chain's black back showed itself a dozen yards off their larboard bow, and the crew knew to respect iron that had not asked their leave to be there. Davos could feel the pull of the current against the hull as if the river had fingers in the ship's planking. He looked up again and told himself to stop doing it. The mind needs resentments as well as morsels. If you feed it only amazement, it will forget to keep you alive. The pale creature turned on a wingtip no hand had ever guided and came at the Betha's prow as if curious. Men ducked who would have laughed at a waved blade. It checked itself with a twist that bent the air. For a heartbeat, Davos saw it near enough that he could have counted its teeth if he had been a different kind of man. And in its eyes he saw not malice but a focus too straight to be anything but itself. It smelled of old stones and sun and hot iron and some sweet trace that made the nailed-shut part of Davos' heart where his wife's laugh lived stir without his consent. "Father," Mathos said again, and this time the word did ask for something. Davos touched his son's shoulder. He felt the life under the leather and the fear behind it, both honest things. "Keep her head," he said, meaning the ship, meaning his boy, meaning himself. The creature opened its mouth. The flame it sent licked over the water alongside the Betha. The wildfire jumped for it like a lover. For an instant, the world went the color of a bruised apple and stayed there. Then the creature climbed, its wings beating, and its companion cut a different angle into the smoke. In the Queen's Hall in Maegor's Holdfast, Cersei dismissed 3 of her ladies for weeping too loudly and drew Sansa to sit at her right hand. The hall was hung with Aran tapestries, and every bird in them seemed to be looking down with permanent disapproval. Cersei's fingers moved against the stem of her goblet like a woman playing a harp no one else could hear. "So," she said, when something out beyond the walls shook the glass in the windows and a from-far scream turned in the air as it entered. "He has winged creatures. Why am I not surprised? Little brothers are always showing off." Sansa looked at her hands in her lap and thought of the prayers she had said and whether they counted if your lips had trembled. She thought of Winterfell's mews at dusk, the sound of feathers ruffling and birds settling to sleep. How that had been a comfort. Whatever moved over the city now was not a comfort. She thought of a story from an old nurse who had liked to frighten children on purpose. A tale of a girl who had fed a fire until the fire had learned to say her name. When it called, she had come. The nurse had never said what happens then. She pressed her hands together, and there was a small relief in the press. "Your Grace?" Podrick Payne said, and stopped, pale as paper. He had approached with the unobtrusiveness of a boy who had been told all his life that his presence was always in question. Tyrion had sent him because he could not be spared on the wall and because he did not yet quite know H. He would live to need a squire later. He carried a message on a ribbon as ridiculous as Tyrion had promised. "Read," Cersei said, and Podrick did, his voice thin and earnest. "Your Grace," he said, "the hand begs that you keep his grace within the Red Keep until the enemy is en route or the sun is down." He licked his lips. He adds that if you must choose, he prefers rout. Cersei's laughter was clear and loud and frightened 2 of the ladies into giggles by force of example. "He prefers rout," she said. "There, you see, Sansa? It is a day for preferences. I prefer to be a dragon." She lifted her goblet and drank. The city did not burn and did not. That is what it felt like from the walls and the decks and the alleys. Hob the cooper crouched behind his cart on the street of Flower and pressed his face to the wood of his wheel and told himself to count the spokes until his heart stopped trying to come out through his ribs. Between the spokes he saw a child's feet in cracked shoes go still and then move again, and he swore to the smith he would find that child later and buy him bread. The vow made his hands steadier. He was surprised by the smallness of it and the way it mattered anyway. On Rainey's Hill, something born of memory and story stirred. The dragon pit was a ruin and had been for more than a century. Its dome broken and grass growing out of its cracks. Its empty perches a map of grief for an age that had ended. Pigeons had written their white script on its stones for 3 lifetimes. That morning a wind ran across it with a taste of old ash and new sweetness. And in the dark under its stones a rat paused in its eating and looked up as if the ceiling were about to change. It did not know what it knew. It did not matter. The pale dragon climbed to a height that made its smallness less relevant and then stooped in a clean line onto the deck of a ship whose captain had decided the right thing to do was to run the gauntlet. The deck went from wood to light with the finality of frost forming. Men flung themselves into the water and found that the water killed them differently than a deck would have. The darker dragon snatched at a mast with a delighted clumsiness and snapped it in half. The splintering crack went up the hill and along the wall and into the September stones. In the hall, ladies looked at one another because something in the sound had gone through them like a wire. "Tell me something," Tyrion said to Varys, his voice a thread sewn tight. "Tell me this was not done without a price." "There is no such thing as done without a price," Varys murmured. "You, of all men, know it." "Then who will send their bill?" Tyrion said. He watched Bronn knock another arrow and let it fly into the mess of sky in a gesture, so useless it laughed at itself. He felt the stunned elation in his bones he had felt only a couple of times. When his plan had worked, when a joke had turned a room, when a woman had looked at him as if he had not needed to ask her to. He felt the undertow in it too. If the city lived by miracle in the morning, it would look for someone to call miracle monger by evening. And if dragons had come once, someone would expect them to come again, on demand. "Your father will claim them were always his," Varys said. Tyrion snorted. He prefers horses. He will call them wasteful. He will ask why they are not larger. And your sister will call them hers because they flew over her head, Varys said, mild. The alchemists will write them into a book and charge for the knowledge. The faith will light new candles to the warrior with a dragon at his shoulder and scold girls who say prayers to the creatures themselves. The small folk will give them names. And Stannis? Tyrion asked low. The name was a weight you could put into a sentence and rely upon to keep it honest. Stannis will go on, Varys said simply, until the world stops or he does. Dragons are not the only thing that knows how to be itself. He was not wrong. The river, being river, found new tongues and eddies around heat and iron both. The chain closed behind the first massive ships with a slow, inexorable finality, and those caught inside made their frantic choices in the time it takes to drink a thimbleful of water. Davos saw 3 Stormlander galleys at once decide to make for the bank where the mud gate crouched. He watched them drive men on the quays before them like sheep until the men became wolves and threw stones and hooks and insults. And then he saw, with a clarity that always came to him at the edge of knowing he might die, that if the gate held against enemies the city hated, it would open easily enough for a miracle the city wanted to touch. Don't, he said aloud. He could not have said who he warned. The hound heard him across water, somehow, and it stiffened his back. The pale dragon stooped toward the mud gate as if the press of men were a thing it had come to learn. The hound stepped forward into a heat he would have turned from on any other day and raised his sword in a stupid gesture that made sense only if you imagined the world could be persuaded to care about gestures. The dragon checked a hand's breadth from his face and drew a breath. In that breath, all of Sandor Clegane's body remembered smallness and smoke and the cooked fat scent of a child's cheek. It came like a wave and washed him backward. His knees bent to it without his permission. The dragon let its breath go not into his face but past him, playing it along the top of the wall as a man might run a blade along his own knuckles to test its bite. The stone blackened. Men screamed with voices high enough to belong to another sex. The beast lifted and beat its wings, and the wind of them put Sandor on his heels. He managed not to run. The restraint felt like less nobility than dumb luck. At the Guildhall, the city's sounds came in like stitching through cloth. Haleen watched the place in the sky where his Kriatu residential had gone and did not try to give words to what his face did. He took a jar of green fire from its cradle and set it on the table with the care of a man placing a crown. We have made many unwise new saints today, he said to no one in particular. Then he did something Meryn had never seen him do. He seemed to consider a second thought and let it show. It would be better if the hand did not die. Meryn ran again. His path took him down the street of steel, where a smith with a face black with work hammered a horseshoe as if he had not heard and had heard everything. And then across a little court where women were hanging wet sheets like flags and then pulling them down because flags were unlucky. He cut behind the hound's kennels, empty, their occupants drafted onto the walls, and into a narrow lane where the air was cooler, relieved of some of the heat by the shade of the tall buildings leaning toward one another like gossipers. A boy sat on a step with a dead pigeon in his lap, plucking it with the smooth efficiency of practice, humming to himself a song the river used to sing. "Mind the bones," the boy said without looking up, as if bones had ever been anything but minded. When Meryn came up to the wall, the stair was clogged with men who wanted to go up and men who very much wanted to come down and found a reason to quarrel about it. He pushed with the authority of a robe that had scorched edges, and no one quite dared tell him to stop. On the parapet, he found the hand. You did not expect the hand to be so small until you did. He had a helm under his arm, and his hair was damp, and a black-sashed man was telling him something, and he was telling the sash something more essential, and they were both using the kind of courtesy men find at the edges of themselves. Meryn went to the wrong person first, to Bronn. "My lord," he said, forgetting what place names went where on the ladder. "The master. Put that lord back on the shelf," Bronn said pleasantly. "Tell him." Meryn turned, swallowed his mistake, and found Tyrion Lannister's eyes on him, a black regard with silvery flecks in it like filings in a pane. "If it is new and odd," Tyrion said, "I am busy with new and odd. If it is victory, come back." "My lord," Meryn said, the master says, "We have paid part of a debt. Try not to die." He says the debt does not balance yet. He had not meant to say it so flatly. Out behind the words, the sky snarled. "I will put that in a ledger," Tyrion said. He looked past Meryn and then did a thing that alarmed the apprentice more than the dragons had. He smiled. It was a smile of recognition. Men like Haelene and Tyrion rarely recognized the same things with delight, but now Tyrion did not look at Meryn at all. He was looking down into the killing yard at the men bringing the great black blocks of stone forward at last. "Now," he said. "Now. The chain's up, the river is a stew pot, and our guests are in the middle. The scorpions ready, as they'll ever be," Bronn said, with the satisfaction of a man whose day had improved. "Show me the range of our new friends," Tyrion said, and the men on the scorpion crews bent to their cranks, and the thrum of their ropes spoke into the air a word that meant the same thing in any language. The first bolt leapt, a great black tooth flying, and went under the pale dragon by a distance that could be measured in size. The second went high, the third low. The fourth struck and skittered, glancing off a ridge of scale that had not yet learned how to be armor or had not yet learned how to be soft enough to yield and then hold. The creature wheeled, a twist as elegant as an insult. Its cry had a note in it that made men bite down without meaning to. "It is too small," Varys said, almost to himself. "For what?" Tyrion asked. "For the word we are using," Varys said. "For dragon, and too large for any other." Tyrion did not answer. He was counting the ships that would live and those that would not with the mean, necessary little mathematics he had learned in old books and new wars. He did not know why the thought arrived then that this day would be told in kitchens and halls for a generation, and that in those stories he would not be handsome. He made a note to find one storyteller and bribe him to make him taller. On the Betha, the work became specific. Davos shouted numbers and men moved in concert and sorrow afterward. A ship called the Lady's Favor collided with a ship with no name he could see. Men swung their swords at the air and the air did not mind. Mathos took the tiller and the ship listened to him because he spoke to it in a voice like his mother's. Firm, surprised when disobeyed. Davos turned and a blade came at him and he moved wrong and then right. He cut. He had not killed a man with his own hand in some time. It felt like pulling a splinter and finding a finger you liked better without it. And over it all, like birds your eyes insist on finding over a field even when you know there are none. The two shapes crisscrossed, writing their own names over the city. The small folk on the Street of Sisters cried out names for them with mouths that had been waiting for names. The pale one became Candle. The darker one, for a cluster in the flea-bottom court, became Smut, which would not stick beyond that alley and would remain a joke those women would tell one another when they were old. Inside the Queen's Hall, something reached its hand into the day's arrangements and took a piece out. Ser Mandon Moore of the Kingsguard, a pale man with a face you could remember and forget in the same breath, took 3 steps left instead of right. It was a modest choice that made a different hinge in the day. On the wall, Tyrion turned to shout at a man in a foolish hat and found Mandon there instead of where he should have been. The blade came like an argument answered with too much haste. Podrick Payne moved and did not know he had moved. Later he'd tell himself that he had stumbled, that he had tripped. The tiny spear he carried for a sword, stupid with earnestness, found a soft ship of flesh under Mandon's arm where even a white cloak was vulnerable, and the day changed its weight. Mandon fell like a coat dropped. Tyrion did not, though for a heartbeat he swayed as if an invisible hand had pushed him. "Thank you," he said, and did not know to whom. The pale dragon turned above them. For a ridiculous, vivid instant, Tyrion thought it had looked down to acknowledge a debt. Then it opened its mouth and spoke fire into the gap between 2 scorpions, and the men on them became a shape with edges too bright to look at. The heat licked Tyrion's cheek like an old enemy greeting a man with a kiss. In the court of the Alchemist's Guild, Hob the Cooper rolled his cart home by feel, because his eyes were watering and because he would not trust them even if they were not. Sella found him halfway up the hook, because she had not stayed where he had told her to. She had flour on her cheek, and a strand of hair had come free and glued itself to her temple with sweat, and she was alive. He put his hand on her head, gently, and said nothing because the things he would have chosen to say were foolish, and the one he wanted to say most he had said the day she was born. Please, and it had not stopped needing to be said since. They're saying the city has pets now, Sella said. Her voice dared a grin and held back from it. In the distance, one of the creatures drew a line, and the air between that line and Hobbs' teeth hummed. They can have all the pets they like, Hobbs said, as long as they eat Stannis before dinner. Sella made a face at the name, respectful and derisive at once. Will the kings eat with the dragons? She asked. If you were a king and had a dragon, would you share? Hobb thought of the way the pale creature had looked up when Haleen spoke to it, as if the sound were something it had a right to. He thought of the master's face, of the wish in it and the fear of that wish. If I were a king, Hobb said, I would still be a Cooper because I am not good at sharing. When the day stumbled toward afternoon, the shape of victory began to declare itself. Not pretty, not pure, real as rope burn on a palm. The chain cut off retreat. The wildfire culled the careless and the unlucky. The dragons worked the river as if they had invented the word for it. Of Stannis' first wave, a third burned, a third broke, a third made the shore and crawled to fight like men who had more reasons than their captain's orders. On the bank below the walls, a clash began of men who had eaten at the same tables once and now found themselves arguing with iron at the ends of their arms. The Hound fought because the world liked him to do that, and then found his feet taking him backward. The wrong fire touched too many places at once. When he stopped and could not keep himself from starting again, he understood a thing he had known for years. Courage could be present and not useful. Bugger this, he said, to the men who needed him to say something, and turned. He walked away from the gate with his sword low in his hand, shield slung, a man leaving a table where the meal had been oversalted. Someone cursed him, and he did not turn to kill them. That was the shape the day made of him. Tyrion saw him go, and his mouth opened to call, and did not. There are men you can keep by shouting. There are men you must let go or break. He was learning a lot of things at once, and none of them would be in any book he could put on a shelf. On the river, Davos had time to decide to live. It was as if a clerk had set a quill to a ledger line and said in a patient voice that there were still sums to be done with his name in them. The Betha took a lick of fire on her port quarter and shuddered and shed it like a bad dream. Mathos, pale and open-faced, laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because you laugh when the alternative is weeping in public. We will make the mouth, Davos said, and the ship seemed to agree. Then, like a courtier taking offense at being ignored, a chunk of falling mast from a Myrish cat came down and cut the Betha's stern free of the rest of her. The world tilted. Davos had a moment to think with clarity that circled like a hawk. There is nothing to be done to save anything but your body now. He flung himself into water that had long since ceased to be water and became something you fought and did not understand. He went under with his mouth open. He came up because he wanted to, which is not always sufficient, and this time was. On the wall, a boy from the Street of Sisters who had been handed a spear and a kettle helmet at sunup put the spear down because he could not hold it and curled his hands into fists and prayed to the mother to notice him. The mother was busy, but the spear, unheld, leaned forward and fell, and in falling, it tripped a man who would have cut someone who would have cut someone who would have killed the boy's brother. Prayer is like that, sometimes. Indirect. By the time the sun tried to find a place for itself in the west, the river was a field of smoking stuff that had once been boats and men and ideas. Stannis had men ashore. He had men who would have crawled through teeth to hold a stone yard of King's Landing for an hour. He had a face that never let on about despair. He had a banner that had been singed but not burned. He had no dragons. He had the knowledge of having seen them that would trouble his sleep if he ever slept. He set his jaw at the men around him as if he could feed them fury and make them forget hunger. The pale dragon came to ground on the lip of the Red Keep's inner yard as if it had always known where it belonged. It folded itself up then into a shape that made no sense, because it seemed to take less room than it had in the air. It shook its head like a cat and sneezed a SMA. LL gout of pale fire into the dust. Men flinched away without bragging. Haleen appeared, breathing harder than a man his age ought to, and put both hands out in a shape that could be prayer or invitation. The dragon looked at him and did not move. because it had nothing to prove. The darker one came down on a parapet on Rainey's Hill that had been cracked for 100 years and took satisfaction in the fit it found there. Pigeons went up like gray rain. 100 children in 10 alleys pointed at it all at once and shouted 10 different names. Tyrion went down the inner stair with Podrick at his back and his own breath loud in his ears. He was more tired than he remembered being and less forgiven. In the yard, the pale dragon scales in the late light had a sheen that suggested pearl and new brews both. Haleen bowed to him without ridiculousness. "Lord Hand," he said. His mouth was split at one corner as if he had smiled too hard or been hit. "We have a problem." "Of course we do," Tyrion said, and found he wanted to laugh like a madman. "Tell me it is that they want to be fed and would prefer goats." "That will be a problem if we have no goats," Haleen said. "This is another. They have gone where they wished and done what they wished, and now they are here because here is where the warm stones are and where the city smells like bread and fear. People will come into this yard in an hour with bowls and offerings and petitions. The faith will come and try to hang a ribbon around something. The queen will come and name them. The city will tell itself 1,000 stories at once. We can afford none of them." Tyrion put his hands on his hips and looked at the beast as a man might look at a complicated device and try to see which way to turn. The dragon looked back with the attention of a thing that would decide later whether to mind what you did. Up on the parapet of the Red Keep, Joffrey's pale face peeked and was pulled back by 2 hands that were not his own. Somewhere not too far away, Cersei's laugh struck a wall and bounced. "Can you control them?" Tyrion asked. "No," Haleen said, honest. "And I do not know if anyone can. A writer." He stopped and his eyes went briefly distant. "I have read. The old books say." "The old books say many things," Tyrion said. "Find me the ones that say something useful that doesn't require me to be someone else. Varys will have a copy. He always does." From the high windows of Maegor's Holdfast, Sansa looked out over the yard and saw the pale creature sitting there like a story being told to itself. Her breath made a small cloud on the glass. She rubbed it away with the cuff of her gown and left a smear. The expression on its face, if one could call it that, was not human and not hateful. It looked like Winterfell had looked at her when she was 5, enormous, utterly indifferent, and likely to fall on her only by accident. She had the sudden desire to take off her shoes and put her bare feet to the stone to learn what the stone knew. She laughed at herself, startled by the odd thoughts fear allows. She turned from the window. The queen was not in the hall. 2 of her ladies had vanished as women vanish when they think there is something to be gained by being elsewhere. Sansa let herself sit and put her hands against her knees to steady them. If she closed her eyes, she could hear the shell crack in the Guildhall as if she were standing beside it. The sound woke a new part of her that had been sleeping with a knife under its pillow. In the alleys, small boys began to play dragon with sticks for wings and spits for fire. In the steppes, old men argued about whether the era was changing and if the stranger had anything to do with it. On the riverbank, Davos Seaworth crawled out of what had once been a fine ship and now was this, and coughed up water in which a thing had burned. He lay on his back and looked up at the shape in the sky and then shut his eyes, because if he looked, he would start talking to a god and he had never found them good listeners. He rolled to his side. His fingers found a broken rung of ladder in the muck. Up, he told himself, and obeyed. A soldier with a storm's head on his shield saw him and did not kill him because he looked harder to kill than the man wanted to manage. Davos shook the water out of his ears and heard men shouting Stannis' name and men shouting another name and men shouting no name at all because sometimes noise is its own army. By the time the wolves of light began to stretch thin across the yard's flagstones, Tyrion had an ache behind his eyes and a layer of ash on his tongue and a list in his head of people to see and lies to tell and small truths that would fit in pockets. Haleen murmured to his creature in a language that was both language and tone of voice and got nothing more than a swivel of its nostril. Varys arrived with a book in his hand as if summoned by a joke. Bronn leaned against a wall like the wall belonged to him. Podrick fell asleep on his feet and did not fall over. "Names," someone said behind Tyrion. It might have been a lord, and might have been an old woman. The yard had filled in that creeping way places fill when the thing at their center is a magnet you cannot see. Someone had brought flowers. Someone had brought a bowl of milk. Someone had brought a sword to lay at the dragon's feet as if it had any use for a man's iron. "What do we call them?" the voice asked. "If you do not name a thing, it makes up a name for you." Tyrion opened his mouth to say nothing and thus say something. Cersei came through the arch, wine-bright and triumphal, and raised her arms as if to accept a crowd's affection she would never allow to touch her. "Mine," she said under her breath, as if that were the right word in any language. Her son peered around her and made a face a child makes when told a cake is not for his hand. 100 men took 100 careful steps backward without meaning to. "Call them what you like," Tyrion said, and his voice carried because he had learned how. "Speak kindly to them in your hearts. Pray to them if that comforts you when you sleep. But remember that they are no one's pet. They are the city's fire made into flesh for a day. They may decide to stay. They may decide to go. Do not teach your children to throw stones at them. Do not throw flowers. They will confuse the two." He met Helene's eye and found agreement there, and something like sorrow. "Tell me what price," Tyrion said quietly, "for Helene alone. Tell me why they came now." Helene's mouth moved around a thought and rejected 3 before he spoke. "Heat wakes heat," he said. "Once, long ago, Dragonflame made things possible that should not have been possible. Now we have made Wildfire with our poor hands and our patience. The red comet you mocked set men to dreaming the old dreams again. The city has not been this afraid and ambitious in 100 years. Men go to bed and burn in their thoughts. If there were things asleep under our stones, they have been listening. And there is one other thing," he added, almost shy, as if the thought were a lover he was not sure he had the right to bring out into daylight. "I do not think they hatched this morning." Tyrion felt his breath go out because the thought was like a hole under his foot he had not seen. "How long?" he asked. "Days," Helene said. "Or weeks. The city would have heard." "You say?" Perhaps it did, and it made a story of it at the same time. Perhaps Hob the Cooper saw a shadow and called it a cat. We have all been half hearing something. Today made us listen. A murmur ran around the yard like the sound of water finding a place to settle. The darker dragon came down off its perch on Rainey's hill and dropped into the yard with a solidity that moved the dust. The pale one turned its head toward it. For an instant, they faced one another with the frank regard of creatures not needing introductions. Then the darker one stretched its neck and sank its teeth into a chunk of beef someone had had the poor sense to throw. And the pale one took a long, careful drink from the bowl of milk and blew it into steam. "We cannot hold them here," Helene said. "They will take what they want from us and then decide whether keeping us alive makes the city a better nest. The hand will need to introduce himself very carefully to them." Tyrion snorted. "I have been introduced carefully," he said. It did not help. He took a step forward anyway, because he had never been good at not stepping forward when a terrible idea put a hand out and beckoned. He stopped at a distance that did not itch at the back of his neck and made himself breathe as if this were a woman he did not care if he impressed. "Good afternoon," he said, "because courtesy is a shield even when it is useless. My name is Tyrion of House Lannister. I am rude and short, but I am not thoughtless. You have done something for my city. I would like to continue that arrangement." The pale dragon made a low sound. It did not sound like a cat this time. It sounded like a bell course rubbed with a gloved thumb. It lifted its head and looked past Tyrion, over his shoulder, at something that had just entered the yard. Tyrion turned to follow its gaze and felt the day take another step toward whatever shape it meant to be. An old man in a gray cloak had come through the arch with the unremarkable gait of a man accustomed to being allowed through places. He was the sort of old the city makes, skin papery, hair sparse, eyes too young. In his hands he held nothing but his hat. When the pale dragon looked at him, he stopped. For a heartbeat the yard was a held breath. Helene drew in air in a way that said he had just recognized a face on a page and found it walking. "Brother," the old man said softly, and it was not to the dragon and not to the dragon. "Sister, children, forgive. I was late." His voice had a coast to it. The accent was from nowhere and everywhere. Varys, at Tyrion's shoulder, made a small, involuntary noise, as if a long plan had been given a detail it had not asked for. 2 gold cloaks shifted their weight and exchanged a look that said they would rather fight a man who could be counted on to sweat. "Who are you?" Cersei demanded. She said it like a man picks up a knife. The old man bowed to her courteously enough to be insolent. A poor brother, he said. A servant of the seven when it serves. A servant of what is when it doesn't. I have come up from Dragonstone. The word fell in the yard like a coin landing on its edge. We felt the heat there. We read the wind wrong and right. We have old books too. He smiled then, without prettying himself, and the dragon's head tilted to match it. I have some names, he said, if you would hear them. Tyrion did not know he had taken a step until he had. Speak, he said, equal parts fascination and annoyance, because the day had been quite full enough of men with knowledge. The old man looked at the pale dragon and said a word in a language that moved like naphtha across a calm. The dragon blinked once, slowly, a bow-made body. Haleen stiffened as if his own spine had been addressed. You know the tongue, he said. I know a tongue, the old man said. There's maybe another. The word for fire changes when it has a throat. Cersei took a strand of her hair between her fingers and looked at the old man as if considering whether he would be worth the effort of cutting. If you are here to prophesize, she said, you are late. Our day has already had its miracles. Do you pretend to command them? No, the old man said. I pretend to survive them. I offer that trick to you as well. He turned his head to Tyrion. You are a man who understands that things that cannot be kept must be learned. Feed them. Do not try to tether. Let them learn the smell of these stones. Bring them liver and clotted cream and the sense of your STR. On just rooms. Do not ring the bells while they sleep. In a week, they will think this place a lair. In a month, they will go looking for something. In a year, he spread his hands. I do not make years. I have lived too many to trust them. Who are you? Tyrion asked again, more softly. Brother Othal, he said, of the cells beneath Dragonstone. I swept a library there for 40 years and learned to read the dust. You are welcome. He looked again at the dragons, and this time sorrow moved across his face like a cloud. They are not the first, he said, and they will not be the last, but they are the first that are ours. He tasted the word and seemed to allow himself joy. Yours, if you are careful. Mine, Cersei said sharply, like a child taking a toy and making it break in her hands. No, Haleen and Varys and Tyrion said together, and somebody in the back of the yard laughed because sometimes the world provides a punchline whether the actors ask for one or not. Night came in strung beads, slow and uneven. The city smoldered and straightened itself and told itself a story about how it had been brave. Men went to sleep because their bodies required it and woke because dreams had been crowded out by new pictures. The September's candles guttered and the mother looked the same as she had in the morning and not. Sansa slept in the curl of the bed as if the bed were a shoreline and she a tide that had not the strength to come all the way in. She dreamed of snow on dragon wings and woke with the taste of ash on her tongue and did not know whether it was prophecy or indigestion. Davos Seaworth opened his eyes in a boat with no oars and was surprised to find that he was a man. His hands hurt like promises. He could not see his ship. He could not see his boy. He made the shape of a prayer in his head and did not say it aloud. A man in a cloak with the wrong pattern on it sat in the stern and looked at him with the calm of a man who has lost too much to panic well. Storm's End, the man said hoarsely, and the word had become a place again instead of a man's banner. Davos coughed and spat river. The cloak offered him a wet piece of bread. He ate it because it was the most beautiful bread he had ever been given. In a loft above the Street of Sisters, Hobbs sat with Sella and broke a heel off a loaf and dipped it in a bowl of rabbit stew and breathed grateful as a prayer. He had kept his fingers and his house for one more night. He thought of the new breath in the Guildhall and the way a room changes when a baby takes its first cry, how the air seems to rearrange itself around that sound. He fell asleep in his chair with his head back and dreamed of his wife's ankles not hurting. Podrick Payne slept under a table with his head pillowed on a coil of rope because he dared not sleep anywhere someone might assume he was comfortable. Bronn snored once like a cough and then settled into a rhythm like a cat. Varys closed the book he hadn't been reading and set it where he could find it in the dark with a hand's memory. Haleen sat on a stone step and watched his dragons watch the sky. Too full to rest, too tired to go again. Brother Othal leaned against a pillar and counted his own years and concluded a few could be laid down now that they had led him here. Tyrion went to the parapet one last time before allowing sleep to trick him. The river's black back gleamed under a slice of moon. The pale dragon lay coiled on the warm stone like an unwholesome cat, its head resting on its own forearms. He felt a breath of something on the back of his neck and did not turn because there are places where turning is an admission of surprise. "You will take credit?" A voice he recognized said, amused and fond and not entirely kind. Shay, the knight had brought her, because knights do that when they are still kind. "I will take blame," he said. "It is easier to shop for." She laughed softly and put a hand on his shoulder, and he let the day sit in his bones and not ask him for anything. From the yard, the darker dragon lifted its head and let a small, testing flame out and drew it back in again as if tasting its own breath. The sound it made was an unimportant one, like a man turning over in sleep, but the hair on Tyrion's arms rose. "There will be stories," Shay murmured against his ear, lazy, fearless. "There are always stories," he said. "They make a city bearable." He thought of what Haleen had said, that heat wakes heat, that men had been sleeping with their minds aflame. He thought of Brother Othal, and of Lord Stannis on a shore with his jaw as set as a nail in oak. He thought of his sister and her hands and of his father's eyes. He thought of a child kneeling in a September and of a cooper laying his palm on a hot shell and believing and not believing at once. There was enough in the day for a year of thinking. The pale dragon shifted, pressed its snout along its own forefoot, and slept. The night made an uncertain promise of coolness. Somewhere in Fleabottom, a woman told a boy that he should go to sleep because tomorrow there would be dragons to see. And she made the word sound like a thing folded in cloth set on a shelf for a week. In the dragon pit, pigeons settled back into the broken ribs of the dome, and under the stones where old bones had laid for 100 years. Something that had not been living for a long time remembered the word for it and wondered. Along the far reach of the river, beyond sight but not beyond knowing, Stannis Baratheon sat on a rock with his wet boots making a dark stain on the sand and looked at the city as if he were memorizing it to take back with him into a night that would not be short. He had seen dragons before, in books, in tapestries, on coins. He had never thought to see them in air. He did not take it as a sign he should change. He took it as a sign something else had changed and that his stubbornness would be required to get the world across that narrow bridge. In the yard, Brother Othal lifted his head at the same moment the pale dragon did, as if they had heard the same sound. He could not have said what the sound was. He made a small space in his heart where a fear could be put and made to pay rent. He would tell Tyrion Lannister in the morning what you feed a thing that might one day feed you. He would tell Haleen which book lied the least. He would go to the sept and lay a copper down and ask the stranger to be lenient because he had done a foolish, brave thing and perhaps deserved another year. The city folded itself around it sleeping like a box with too many hinges. It creaked. It did not break. The dragons, who were not as large as stories and not as small as some men would have liked, slept on their own heat. When the dawn came, it came like a caution. Mist lay along the river like a hand hiding a mouth. Hobbs' back popped when he stood. Sella laughed at him and he let her. Davos Seaworth woke with sand in his mouth and Stannis' name on his tongue like a prayer he'd learned new. Sansa bound her hair back with a ribbon she had never liked and found she did not mind it this morning. Tyrion took a cup of water and held it up to the light to see whether it was clean and then drank even though it was not. Cersei got out of her bed and put her feet on the floor like a conqueror and had wine brought and did not drink it yet. The pale dragon lifted its head and cracked a joint and blew 3 delicate puffs into the morning air for the pleasure of watching them streak and fade. The darker one stretched itself against the parapet of the broken pit and sent birds up again in a panic that amused no one but itself. The city inhaled and withheld judgment. Then the bells began after all, with a foolish clamor and the wrong hymn, because bells have their own ideas. The first peal called men to work. The second called them to prayer. The third would have called them to arms, but the city had run out of arms to give, and so it called them to look instead. They looked. From the mouth of the river, a small boat came in unchallenged, bearing the ragged flag of a lord who had been a king in his heart. The man in it did not lift his head. The man on the wall who saw him first put his hand in his mouth as if he had discovered a new tooth and it hurt. Men woke the hand, but he was already awake. Helene gathered his robe. Varys flicked a speck of dust from his sleeve that might have been a strategic consideration too small to share. The queen put on a necklace as if it were a gorget. Brother Othal smiled to himself and stepped toward the yard, thinking of a lesson he had swept around for 40 years. In the loft, Hobb took down his mallet and set it back, pointlessly, and told Sella not to go near the river today unless she meant to come home with no hair. Davos reached for a rung of rungless loyalty and hauled himself up it. Sansa squared her shoulders and walked to the window as if she might see the shape of the life she had not asked for and accept it before breakfast. Above them all, the dragons blinked, as if the city were a world they were getting used to, as if they intended to learn the word you had to say to it to make it purr. The morning held itself together by wanting to. It would not last. It never did. But while it did, King's Landing was a place where the impossible had come down into its yards and perched, not as a visitor but as something that had decided to attend. And then, because stories are greedy and the city hungers too, footsteps ran in the yard in a rhythm that meant more than haste, and a boy with a potboy apron flapping stood at the arch and shouted in a voice that broke. "They say the Queen's brother rides. They say the Tyrells have come. They say." He said too many things at once and none of them could be held by a single mouth. The dragons turned their heads as if the music had changed. Somewhere below the yard, in the kitchens, a cook dropped a pan and it made a note like a song starting again. Tyrion reached for his sword and for a cup and for an idea and found none of them where he had left them. The pale dragon lifted off the yard as if the air were a blanket being shaken out. And all around the city men and women who had slept too little stood up into a day that had brought them an old animal and a new war and asked them to treat them like facts. The river went on doing what rivers do, pretending to forget. The bells said something and took it back. The sky had room. The city breathed in slow. The city did not breathe out yet.